I feel like this music with it or something, but we'll just get started. I want to ask you guys a question. Do you raise kids or do you raise adults? I know, it sounds like a weird thing to ask, right? You know, most of the time we have that language of raising kids. We don't, some people raise kids. They're pretty good at it. I've met a few 20 and 30-year-old kids out there, right? But the idea is that we raise adults, right? How long does it take to turn a kid into an adult? For those of you online, you may not have heard that. He said too long, right? It's a lifetime, right? So it can take a long time to do that. I've been thinking a lot this week about time. You know, as we walk with Jesus into the wilderness and we're talking about kind of getting closer to God and being in the desert with Jesus and like he went into the desert in the New Testament, one of the things I want to think through a little bit is time. I was reading this week, kind of searching a little bit because it's that time of year for most of us, and it seems like it's come a little bit early this year where it's time to start, cutting the yard, trimming the trees back, right? Pruning things up because stuff's starting to grow. If you haven't started on that, you're late. Sorry. And I got to reading about different types of trees a little bit, and in Texas, I believe, somebody will correct me, our state tree is the pecan, right? Right. You know how long it takes for a pecan tree to produce pecans? Who wants to grow that tree? If you put a pecan in the ground and you think you're going to have a pecan from that pecan anytime in the next 2 decades, you're wishful. 10 to 20 years from a seedling. Most people don't plant seedlings. They go somewhere and buy a tree and they plant it. And that can take 7 to 10 years to produce fruit. I ain't got time for that. 7 to 10 years, most Americans aren't even in the house that long, right? You plant something somewhere, you're not even going to be long enough around to see it actually produce any fruit. Now, me, I'm a fig tree person. 1 to 2 years, we're eating something, guys. All right, I got a fig tree in my backyard. It threw a lot of figs last year. It's already starting to bloom this year. It's 6 months' time. I'm going to have a few gallons of figs, right? Some good food to eat. Now, it's not pecans. I'm not going to be able to make pecan pie with it. You think about the fruitfulness of things and how long it can take for something to actually become fruitful. One of the things that kind of happens, and it's probably happened for all of you, when you get into a new place, maybe a new house or a new city or, a new environment or, new kids, new things, you work hard. You try to make it, to change it, to make it better, to kind of construct it into your own thing. I think when we first moved in our house back into 2019, I immediately started trying to work on the yard because I wanted my yard to look nice and I wanted to have some shrubs around the house, and my wife was the same way, both kind of wanted that. So we started working and started making that happen, and after a year or so, you could start to see the fruits of that labor. But then over time, if you're not careful, if you keep doing the same thing, the ground that you've planted things in ceases to do as well as it once did. I can look at spots in my backyard where my kids play and the grass doesn't want to grow. And you can walk over to it and you could knock on it. It's become hard, calloused. And so there's recommendations that you have to take some time and dig some holes in it and break it up. And if you're a farmer or if you've ever done any kind of work in vegetable gardens, you know that one of the things that you have to do on a pretty regular basis is stop and break up hard soil. Some of y'all in here have never farmed, never toiled in any kind of soil, but it just so happens, and this is not something I premeditated on this, but it just so happens that today we're talking about soil. and Jesus' interactions with it and God's interactions with it. And it happens to be at the time of year where some of you have started thinking about soil and fertilizing things because you want to see fruit in the summer. You want to see fruit in the fall. And so we have to start planning for that fruit now. I think our problem, though, for us and for the rest of the world is we can get really, really stuck in routine, right? We've been talking about this in this series, that we can become creatures of such habit and productivity that we can just make things sterile over time, make things hard over time. I remember when we were looking at our backyard, and I really would like to have a path in our backyard. And what I wanted was something that I thought would be pretty easy and pretty nice. Concrete, right? It's fast. You just make some forms, you pour it, it gets hard as a rock, and then you're done. Low maintenance, easy going, ugly. My wife, on the other hand, wanted to invest a little more time. She wanted flagstone. Y'all ever seen that stuff? Whatever landscaper invented that as an idea, I would love to strangle someday. It's beautiful, but it's work, constant work. It doesn't like to stay just like you left it. Over time, things beat on it, and what once was just beautiful naturally, you got to keep maintaining, and you got to keep putting effort into it. It's a lot like kids, right? They come out, they're gorgeous. Doesn't matter if they're covered in what, they're gorgeous, right? I mean, I love babies. I see a little Easy running around here, and he's got these giant cheeks. I'm like, he's perfect, just, But he won't stay that way. Right? Stephen, little Natalie up here running around, just gorgeous little cute. She's not going to stay that way. You got to keep tilling that soil. You got to keep working on that kid. Otherwise, that beautiful little thing will turn into a little monster on its own. Right? Your yard's the same way. Your life's the same way. You get in that routine of just doing what's been done, and if you're not careful, you end up with something not like God intended. And as we look through Jesus' life, we see things about him that he gets into these routines, but he also takes time away. And then just about the time you think you got him figured out, he throws a curveball. And when it comes to silence, the question I think we need to be reflecting on is that when we insert ourselves into it to break up our routine, do we stay in it long enough to let it be effective? Are we too quick? Because when we get into silence, the first thing that we interfere with or discover is we discover all of our flaws, right? The demons come out. We expose what is really going on in our unfaithfulness and our unproductivity and our barren spots in our life. It floods into our brains, and we're immediately called into repair mode. I want to fix it. I want to fix it now. And sometimes that's the case. It needs to happen. But a lot of times, we need to still the waters of our mind. We need to, as Hosea would say, we need to break up the fallow ground. Hosea chapter 10, we discover this country of the northern kingdom of Israel. It's after the split's gone on. Back, the heyday has passed, and we have our northern kingdom, and they're wealthy. They're a wonderful group of people. They're prosperous. They're active in worship. They're busy outwardly. And Hosea comes in and he says, hey guys, y'all are doing a lot of good stuff, but you're also doing a lot of unproductive stuff. In fact, you have become unfruitful. You look gorgeous on the outside, but you're no longer making fruit. You have become barren, yet beautiful. They were spiritually set in their ways. Their ground had become fallow, slowly drifting from God's heart, even though their start was right where it needed to be. It says this, sow, and this is in Hosea chapter 10, starting in verse 12, Hosea has just gotten through making this argument about how they've aligned themselves and they've let things creep into their worship that has become part of their culture from other countries rather than the true worship of God. That they started off great and beautiful, but over time, doing the same routines over and over again, they've lost the heart, they've lost the passion. They've become hard, yet still staying active in their participation. And Hosea says this, sow for yourselves righteousness, reap steadfast love, break up your fallow ground, for it is time to seek the Lord, that he may come and rain righteousness upon you. Now, I want you to notice something about that verse that I 100% guarantee you didn't notice. The first thing he says to do is sow. The second thing he says to do is reap. The third thing he says to do is break up. And the fourth thing he says to do is seek. Now, for those of you who are farmers, is that how you do things? If you're going to plant something, if you're going to sow righteousness, wouldn't you start with breaking up the ground? Wouldn't you start by picking your spot, seeking out the spot where you want to do this, breaking up the ground, then sowing the material, and then much later on, reaping? I kind of think that's how I would do it. So why would Hosea be saying this in this way? What is it that when you just kind of glance through it and you see all these planting words that are supposed to come out to fruit that you might just not notice? Because when things are out of order, there's something to pay attention to. When things aren't aligned quite right, it's not that somebody necessarily made a mistake, it's that something's trying to be highlighted. So what does he really mean when he says, number one, that you should sow for yourself righteousness? I think what God's trying to say there and Hosea is trying to say there is that you should be sowing towards the direction of righteousness. That the goal that you're headed down as you sow is you're looking for righteousness and you're heading that way, that's the fruit you ultimately are trying to pursue in this. And so that as you work in life, as you work and do, that's where your heart needs to be. And the goal ought to be that when you sow the direction of righteousness, which takes a long time. Righteousness is not something that you just get instantly. Righteousness is something that has to be cultivated. Like I said earlier, to take a newborn and turn them into adult is not an overnight process. My family and I don't know that I could actually recommend this movie, but I'm going to tell you that we did this anyway because I'm not always that smart. But last night, we have a tradition sometimes that we like to have little family movie nights, and I like to find old movies to expose my kids to. Swiss Family Robinson, great one, right? If you've never seen that one, there's a few old ones. I'm not talking about the ancient one from like the 40s. I'm talking about the one from like the 60s, right? That's a good one, right? Well, and I was looking through and I came across this one, Big, with Tom Hanks. I've never seen Big. I've only ever seen that piano thing that they do. And I think I've heard great things about this movie. Let's watch that. And there's a couple parts in it. Just saying, made for TV, right? But the whole thing that's playing out in the movie is that a kid has become an adult without going through the process. And it exposes some things that don't seem quite right. Think about that for a second. Sowing towards righteousness is a process, not an outcome. It's turning a child into an adult is a process, not an outcome. I remember my mom saying this back when I was really young. She said, and she's actually here today. Sorry, Mom. I remember her. There's not much I remember, but there's some things that I remember. And there's this one thing that really stood out in my mind. And it was, she said, I don't think you really ever mentally are kind of past the age of like 18 to 20. Like your body hits that age and then it keeps going, but your brain's like, I'm an adult. And I've really thought a lot about that. It's kind of true because there's things I want my body to do that won't do anymore. But I also think about it this way, like there are moments where I go, oh yeah, I'm an adult, I can do that. I'm not a kid anymore. There are moments where I forget that I'm 40-something, and there's really not much more adult but there is a lot more adult I can be, right? Are we ever fully mature? It's a direction to head, and I like to say I'm not fully human yet, because what God intended for humans, have I really reached that? Right? Sow towards righteousness, and then reap. I love what he says here. What is the fruit that Hosea says that we're supposed to reap? You will reap kindness and love. Now, I look at Jesus' life, and I don't really see a whole lot of love come in his direction toward the end of it. He got thrown on a cross. Yet, in his death, he reaped more kindness and love for humanity than humanity had ever experienced before. And humanity continues to experience, despite what the news will show you today, despite what you think is going on. I always remind people, news is the exception to the norm. So if you look on the news and you see evil, you ought to think in your mind, news is exception to the norm. Nobody reports on the good that is constantly happening everywhere. That doesn't make it to the top. You can try to share that on Facebook all day, but negative things share 6 times faster than positive ones. Jesus, his whole life, the goal was to reap kindness and love, and that's what his followers continue to reap. It's a long process. And then in the middle of that process, sow this, reap this, and right after you've done that, break up. Create space in your soil so that you can go deeper. Turn that soil so you can break up the hard earth so that you can maintain. And that kind of takes us into the New Testament to the parable of the soils. I'm not going to spend any time in there today, but the idea is that if you don't have deep roots, if you don't break up things, then you might produce some fruit real quick. But the first sign of heat, the first difficulty you run into, the first challenge that you have in your life may pull you out of the ground and away from faith. And then finally, there's this idea of seeking. And it's the constant seeking of God no matter what. Fallow ground is land that has been left unplowed for a season. It becomes hard. It's resistant soil. Even if you threw seed on it, it could not accept it. Rain can hit it and a lot of times just run off rapidly. It can't even absorb the water. Spiritually, this is what happens to us when we are left untreated for a season. Our hearts can become hardened by routine. We can become complacent. We can get easily distractive. And what Hosea is calling the nation of Israel to in the northern kingdom right before they're going to, just newsflash, if you read Hosea, they don't do it. Just saying. They end up getting ransacked. I mean, Jesus ends up having to come, and humanity's on this repeat cycle of not paying attention, right? It really kind of never stops. I would argue that over time, the kingdom is influencing greater and greater, and it's spreading to more and more people. And right now, today, there's more people that believed in Jesus than ever believed in him before us. But the call is an active call. The call is a call for people to participate. It's not passively waiting for God to come cultivate. It's actively cultivating. And the promise that we have is grace. That if we break up the soil, what does Hosea say? God will rain righteousness. God will supply growth. But first, we must break up the soil. In Luke chapter 13, 6 through 9, we get a little story about a fig tree. Love fig trees. Love talking about them. That's what it says. A man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came seeking fruit on it and found none. And he said to the vine dresser, "Look, for 3 years I have come seeking fruit on this fig tree, and I find none. Cut it down. Why should it use up the ground?" And you got to remember, this guy's in a business. He's got so much land. He's decided what he wants where on this land. He is planting things according to what he believes is the best ground for them, doing what he believes is best for them, and then he is analyzing them after 3 years, which is great. He didn't just put the fig tree in the ground and say, hey, buddy, it's growing season. Hey, buddy, it's fruit season. Where's your fruit? He gave it time. He gives us time. It's one of those questions that I'll get ever so often, as you're taking a child and turning him to an adult, what age do they hit accountability? God gives a lot of time and a lot of grace. He gives a lot of time and a lot of grace to us. We may have seasons where we're barren. We may have seasons where we are fruitful, but just not fruitful in righteousness and love and kindness, but fruitful in other things. And God's going to come in and check. This is the story. He's coming in to check. He's asking the vine dresser. He's asking the person who he's left in charge, what's going on with this tree that I've planted, that I have placed in this specific location with all of these resources? Is it doing what I want it to do? It's not. And so we get this anger that kind of comes in and says, well, I'll be done with it. And we get to see Jesus and God interact a little bit. Watch this. But the vine dresser answered, Sir, let it alone this year also, until I dig around it and put manure on it. I love this. Put manure on it. And if it bears fruit next year, well and good. But if not, you can cut it down. Sometimes going into the silence, as you break up that fallow ground of life, it feels like you get manure dropped on you. Like the manure hit the ceiling and went everywhere, right? It's nasty. It stinks. If you're a gardener, you understand something. That nasty stench, ever so often in life, is the fertilizer we need to get fruitful again. It's the change in our life, in our soil, in our structure that we need to become fruitful again. It's why so many times as a therapist, when somebody comes in and their life has just been ransacked by something difficult, that my brain looks at it and goes, you just got hit by a plow and a hoe, buddy. The ground around you is getting broken up, and right now it feels like you're about to die. I think I'm about to get dug up and plucked. I think my life's about to end. This difficulty, I'm not going to be able to survive. My roots aren't deep enough. And I'm looking at them going, I'm kind of hoping it's God digging around you and putting some manure in so that you can actually grow deeper and stronger. In fact, if you trust God in that and you have faith in that, this may be the time that you actually start to become fruitful. Right? What has just happened in your marriage may actually turn out to be later on something amazing, although it's super painful now. That's what's going on with your kids right now. Maybe end up, if you stay faithful, if you stay there long enough and you keep focusing on righteousness and you try to say, you know what, God might be breaking up my fallow ground right now, that I have got a hardened heart, that I've been stuck in my ways and my processes, and I need to let that get broken up around me so that I have a chance of becoming fruitful again. The background of this story pushes us a little bit. Pushes us into God's grace a little bit farther, because the background of this story is everyone would have known that a fig tree should be bearing fruit by year 3. Year 2, it should throw a little bit, but by year 3, it should be really doing something. And this story is saying that it's year 3. It isn't doing what it's supposed to do. A tree without fruit for 3 years would be considered unproductive, and we need to move on to a better tree. It's time to cut this one down and throw it into the fire. It and all of its genetics. Bye. This is an unfruitful line. Let's cut off a piece of another one and plant it. The vine dresser in Israel were timely familiar with the vine dressers there would have been very familiar with the story of cultivating fig trees, digging around the roots, adding manure. It was very hard work. It was disruptive work, but it would increase the chance of productivity. It was worth the effort to go through. It was worth the difficulty to stop and to do the hard labor. The parable is not warning of condemnation first, like so many believe when they think about Christianity, that God just wants to condemn us. The parable is a story about patience and that God's willing to cultivate us. It's the same as what was going on in Hosea as he looks at the northern kingdom and said, God wants to cultivate you. He's not given up on you. Please just allow it to happen. Break up your ground. Let him in. Hosea calls us to that. Luke says that God, like the gardener, will work patiently with us. Growth requires both of us to participate. Both God and the Spirit living in us, and both us and our willingness to be broken up. It's an uncomfortable process. Luke 5:15 through 16, but now even more, the report about Jesus went abroad, and great crowds gathered to him to be healed. But he would withdraw to desolate places and pray, as was his custom. This repeated action of Christ, when we look at him, he would be productive, but then would withdraw, would be productive, would be withdraw. And you really think about his life and how God created plants to be and how God created the things for us, that when we look out into the world, we ought to be able to see his creation, his patterns going on. And we see fruitfulness and building, and fruitfulness and connection, and fruitfulness and destruction of those things around us that are trying to kill us. And this back and forth. And Jesus mimics that for us in the New Testament of doing, and as was his habit, taking time away. This is how spiritual formation happens. Spiritual formation is a lot like sleep. You got to have sleep to rebuild what's been torn down. You have to have rest in order to be rejuvenated so that you can be productive. In fact, a lot of people will tell you that working out, lifting weights, running, whatever exercise that you're doing actually tears things down. It's the most important thing you can do is sleep to let your body rebuild. Being fruitful is giving away you. Said this before, I'll say it again. Trees don't bear fruit to feed themselves. They bear fruit to feed whatever is to come and to spread their fruitfulness. But it tears them down, and they must be rooted deep in soil. They must pull their nutrients out. And silence and desert living can be that for us, where we step away and we are reminded that we are the beloved. We push our roots a little bit deeper. We break up the busyness of our life. It's not that busyness is bad. There's time for it, but that we break it up intentionally, as was Jesus' habit. And then we stay there long enough for the manure to do its work. That's how it feels. We expect growth. We expect fruit. And we must deal with the one thing that is the hardest thing to cultivate, and that is the human heart. That's our metaphor. It's that part of us that's real quick to go south and lead the rest of us astray. This week, as some of you head into spring break, this week as temperatures warm up, this week as you go out to start doing yard work, hopefully now as you till that ground, pull those weeds, trim those bushes, you're thinking about God in this. You're not just thinking about the task at hand, but you're trying to imagine yourself in those moments of quietness as you prune those things for productivity. What is your life needing pruned? What is your roots diving into? That maybe take some time in the quiet, that as you work with nature, you are reminded of what God's work is in you, so that you can become more productive. And as you think about things to prune, maybe you try to identify one habit and one routine that's just busy taking up space in your life. Remove it intentionally. Use silence, fasting, reflection, journaling if you need to. Ask God to expose the branches that are barren and give you the courage to let Him remove them. And as you sit in silence, trust. You have to trust this, because it doesn't always feel that way, and you have to give it enough time to work. Because as you walk into silence, the demons come at you. You start getting attacked by everything in your life that you don't like. You start getting attacked by every demand of things that you should be doing because you're lazy if you're not doing them. But sit and give it time and ask God to fertilize, to plant you anew if need be, to prune so that you can be more productive for Him. And as you sit there in discomfort and you imagine that discomfort, you feel that discomfort, imagine it not as pain, not as punishment, but as preparation. As you dethatch that grass, as you aerate that yard, as you clean up the leaves, as you trim the bushes, don't imagine it as punishing. Imagine it as preparing. So that as the sun hits and the rain of righteousness pours, you can be fruitful. Amen? Amen.
Let us stand. Let us do it again. 1,000 generations
falling down in worship to sing the song of ages to the Lamb. And all have gone before us, and all will believe. We'll sing the song of ages to the Lamb. Your name is the highest. Your name is the greatest. Your name stands above them all. All thrones and dominions, all powers and positions. Your name stands above them all. And the angels cry, holy. All creation cries, holy. You are lifted high, holy, holy forever. Si has sido salvo y redimido estás, cántale a esta canción. Si su nombre llevas, Él sí te libertó. Cántale a esta canción. Le cantaremos por siempre, amén. Cantan ángeles, santo, canta la creación, santo, por siempre serás, santo, santo por siempre. Your name is the highest. Your name is the greatest. Your name stands above them all. All thrones and dominions, all powers and positions. Your name stands above them all. And the angels cry, holy. All creation cries, people sing, holy to the King of Kings. Holy, you will always be.
Holy, holy,
Holy forever.
This morning, some of you may need prayer. You may need a chance to let off some of what has been